right, good morning, everyone. I know some people might still be trickling in bright and early, but it is 7:15, and so we're gonna get started here. Thank you so much for joining me bright and early for our next Learn a Latte presentation. Learn a Latte is a student services series that deals with different topics related to your student's life at Hersey or life after Hersey, hence the spelling of the word latte. And it's bright and early, so you might need a latte or some other kind of caffeine to get you going in the morning. So thank you again for joining me. The video and microphone should be off, but if you have questions along the way, the chat or Q&A, should be open. If you submitted questions in advance, I'll either try to work in those answers or address them kind of all in a lump at the end. But again, if something comes up along the way, definitely let me know there. So this topic of belonging in college graduation is something that's really interesting to me, and it has been for a long time. And now that lately there's been a couple of articles about it, this is kind of where I thought, okay, maybe it's time to talk about this. The first article came in like October, and it talked about community college students being kind of disappointed with their experience. They didn't feel like they were, really finding belonging on campus. And I kind of thought, well, that's, definitely interesting. Maybe that's more on the college, because students, if you're going to community college, you don't have much of a choice. You're kind of going to your community college, your local one. But then another article from Inside Higher Ed, came out just a few weeks ago with a study from Wake Forest University that equated belonging with graduation, college graduation. And so even just little gains in the student's sense of belonging, had impacts on their chances to graduate. And we know that college can be expensive, and it's, something that, it's a big investment. And so if you're going to go there and you're not going to graduate in the end, that is definitely not a good thing. So, I thought, this really is something that I've been trying to stress in different ways over the years. But maybe now that there's some more data or some more data or surveys or things like that about it, maybe it will be a little bit more obvious to people. And so I kind of wanted to talk about it and some of my thoughts, about it as well. So to me, it goes back to those 5 Ps of the college search planning. And for junior and senior parents, hopefully you've heard this at least once, if not more. It's the big focus of our junior presentation in the fall, October or so of junior year. Freshmen, if there's freshman and sophomore parents, if you haven't heard this yet or only a glimpse, you will get that fall of junior year. But the 5 Ps of the college search, planning process, person, people, place, program, price, in my opinion, all have to work together for these schools to be good fits, okay? And so what happens a lot is that families jump right to the program. What are some good schools for accounting? What are some popular schools for engineering? Where are some schools that Hersey students often go for, pre-med or something like that? And while that is one piece, the program piece, I always encourage students and families to back up and start with who is the student in the first place. Because I can't tell you that this school is good for accounting or engineering or whatever if I don't know more about the student, who they are, what kind of learner they are, what they like to do, who they like to be around, and all those things first. And then we try to find, schools that fit, that have their major or that are in your family's price tag and so on and so forth. This, because again, what is the point if you go to the top ranked college for this major, according to some magazine, if your student's miserable there and then they don't end up graduating? Like, who cares that you went there for a semester or a year or 2 years if it doesn't, get you the degree in the end? It's not the point. So really having your students think about, who they are. And at the end of this, I have some questions for them to ask themselves to kind of figure out, that community. So, or belonging. So when I hear belonging, I hear community. And so I used AI to kind of help me get this definition of community and belonging. And so a strong sense of community directly fosters a sense of belonging. So as community provides shared values, support, safety, and connections, they make the individual, again, I stress all the time that this is an individual process. So again, when student and families are like, where's the most popular schools for Hersey students? I say this is an individual process. So it doesn't really matter. It's really more about the individual. So that makes the individual feel accepted, valued, and truly a part of something larger than themselves. So again, if you're engaged in that college community, again, none of this has to do with what major they have or anything. It's really about, who they are. And so it's this cycle where if they feel connected, they feel belonging, it's going to be better well-being. That well-being is going to lead to them wanting to stay there, wanting to engage, wanting to do well in their courses, to graduate, and so on and so forth. So, so again, when I hear this belonging, I automatically think community. So before I talk about some ways that maybe community are, I just want to stress a few things that, community is not. Community has to be like an in-person, community, right? And so sometimes our students, like, oh yeah, I'm in this online community and I'm in this, social media communities. And those, research is also showing, are becoming more and more dangerous. And one of the top epidemic that we're seeing in places, especially in college campuses at times, is loneliness. Students are feeling alone. They're on a campus of 40,000 students, but they're feeling alone. They're locked up in their dorm room on the computer. That's not a community. That's the opposite. So even if you're, like I said, even if you're in a huge basketball or football stadium with other fans cheering, if you're not connected to any of them, if they're not your friends, if that's not people you're going to hang out with later, that's not the same as a community. A community is going to be one, again, where you, if I go back, where you have those shared values and support, and you have that sense of belonging. So when it comes to, what communities might your students be looking at, it could be a lot of things, a lot of different things. And these are just some that I put on here that came to mind. So for example, if your student is, engaged in their faith, they go to church now, youth groups, things like that, they may want to find a college where there's other people who practice, that faith. I saw on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, somebody had posted something kind of related, and they were like, the topic was how to find your church when you get to college. And I thought, that's so backwards. Like, why would I go to college and then try to find my church? If I'm part of a church, I want to make sure it's there first, and then pick the college, so that I know that it's there. I don't want to take the chance. And that's the same with any of these topics. I want to look in advance if it's there first before I jump into committing to the school. So one of the questions that came in, not sure if this person's on here or not, but was, what if I'm a student of color? How do I kind of figure out if there's a community there with my ethnic or racial background? And that's a great point, right? Because that could be a big thing. If you don't feel like you connect to anyone there, if there's no one like you there, and again, in a lot of these different categories, you're not going to feel that sense of belonging. And so, again, I'll talk about in a minute how to do that. But a lot of this is stuff, basically, the bottom line is you've got to research in advance. If you're first gen, are there going to be supports? Maybe your community will be being an athlete. I was an athlete in college, so just purely by being on the team, that was one community that I was already a part of, that understood life as a student athlete, that understood my, what it's like to go day to day, with practices and competitions and things like that. Maybe you're really into Greek life and you want to be part of a fraternity or sorority, and that's going to be a big part of your community. Maybe you're a theater or music, acting, dance person, and you want to make sure that there's that community there for you as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find different communities. And a lot of colleges stress, these when they're doing their admissions presentations. One thing I kind of want to mention with this too is sometimes with highly selective schools, especially that do that holistic review, they're looking at everything. They're looking at the students' activities, the essays they wrote, letters of recommendation. If the college does not admit the student sometimes students say, well, I have like all A's and perfect ACT score. How was I not admitted? And for some of those, especially smaller, selective, especially liberal arts type schools, even, they're looking to see if these students are going to fit into their community or communities on their campus. And while it might hurt to say, that to see that you were denied, it can sometimes be a blessing in disguise, I would say, because this college is usually pretty good at determining things. And they might have looked at the student application and said, I don't think this person is the right fit for our community. Not that they're a bad person or they couldn't handle the math class or the, whatever. It's just, this wouldn't be a place where we see them fitting into a community, and we don't want that. We want them to be successful and belong and graduate. So again, sometimes it's not, a lot of times it's not the academics that don't admit someone, it's other things. And that's why colleges do, that holistic review. They want to make sure that there's going to be a community for you. So how do we determine this, right? Maybe like the $1 million question that I know some people wanted to hear. And it's tough. This definitely is tough, because you can go online and you could look up the majors and you could see what classes you would take and what minors they offer. You can go do a net price calculator and try to figure out how much it's going to cost. Obviously, you can look up the size of the school and all that, but how do you get a sense of these communities? And so I can't stress enough that visiting is probably the first and foremost biggest thing. Before your student commits to a school, they have to visit in person at least once. None of us would buy a house just by looking at the pretty pictures on realtor.com or whatever. Same thing with the college. So most people do an official visit when they visit. So they sign up through the school, they get the admissions presentation from the admissions staff, and then they go on a campus tour with a student tour guide. And those are really important too. Those will give you all the basic info, the logistics of how things work, all the resources that are offered, things like that. But on top of that, I would highly suggest you do an unofficial visit. And what do I mean by that? It could be at the same time that you are, there for the official visit. But once it's over and they kind of, dismiss you, wander around campus as much as you can on your own. Go back to the student union or the dining hall and see, are there students maybe who look like they would be a community I would want to be a part of? Does everyone look like they're intermingling? Do they look happy together? Are people just generally, look happy there? And if you see someone that is either alone or whatever, maybe ask somebody like, hey, like, how is it at this school? How do you feel like you belong? What are you involved in? Because again, the tour guides and the admission staff, they're going to give you, they're paid, or they're going to give you the polished speech. But if you want like a raw opinion, try to find another student who's not, doesn't have a script, and see what they might say. Take a look at the surrounding community as well. So don't just like drive to the school, park, go to the presentation, leave. If you have time, and I know it can be expensive to stay overnight and things like that, but maybe stay overnight. If you're if you want to be in sports, or you want to really be involved as a fan, go when there's a game and see how it is. If you want to be in fine arts, go when there's a play or a concert. If like the faith thing or a certain group is important, then see if there's a club meeting, or go to that church, that day, and talk to, the pastor or the people who go there, and see is this a place that I would feel comfortable in. So the research can be outside of just the actual like school stuff. It's, the surrounding community as well. So again, that can take some time, and I'll show you in a second a quick commercial for an upcoming presentation I'm doing at the Prospect Heights Library, more about visiting. But besides the visit, you can also do some research by, of course, asking the admissions reps, what resources do you have? What kind of student would be successful here? Things like that. When I say check the website, when the reps come to our school and they say we have 700 or 800 or 500 or however many student organizations, does anyone actually go on the website and see what those are? I know our U of I rep always comes and says, yeah, we have this squirrel watching club. And so I actually looked on Instagram, so social media is another great one, and said, is there actually a squirrel watching club? And apparently there is, and they have 700 followers, and you can kind of see how active some of these groups may be. Most of the social media sites especially are going to be public. So you can see, does this group meet regularly? Who looks like goes there? And before you visit, maybe you send them a direct message and say, hey, like, I'm coming to visit. Is there a meeting I can come to, or can I talk to somebody? This sounds like a group I really want to be a part of. Can I talk to a current student? Can you meet me somewhere? And that could be a great way to connect with people and see, yeah, this is someplace I would really want to go. Or you can also try to find, some alumni, what was your experience as well, if you know some, or through LinkedIn or something like that. That's another way. Again, just talk to people and see what their experience was. So again, here's this upcoming event in February. It'll go out again in the Husky headlines today, so I won't spend too much time, but I'll dive a little bit deeper over at the Prospect Heights Library about visiting and connecting with it in college fairs as well. All right, so a question that came in, again, if you have questions along the way or comments or something, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. But one question that came in advance was a couple of them actually. How do you help a kid prepare to connect after the first week of college? Freshman activities die down. So again, most colleges will have like that first week where they'll be, welcoming back. And if you saw in the one picture, they'll have all the tables out of all the different stuff to get involved in and things like that. But once that dies down, how do you help, them settle in and so on and so forth? Before I answer that, I'm going to tell you how not to do it. Okay. And not to do it is to get too involved, or really at all involved at this point once they get in. So these are, depending on how you're watching this, you may not be able to see what they say, but there are some articles over the last couple of years of parents trying to basically force their hand at helping their students find belonging while they're there. So using Facebook groups to help arrange play dates, or reaching out to different offices or departments for their students, and trying to force again those belongings. It's just not a good. It's not going to work. It's not a good look. It doesn't give your student a chance to grow and learn these things as well. So I would highly recommend you not, try to do those things afterwards. I would, again, the question goes back to what can we do beforehand? And so I really think that beforehand, a big part of it is that research. Coming in there with what, for lack of a better term, a plan of attack, what communities they want to belong to. Like I said, reach out in advance to those groups that they might want to connect with. There's now with social media, you can make connections before. You can, again, through social media, through different groups, students are already finding roommates and other people through these things before they even do housing and stuff like that. So try to make those connections beforehand so that when they get there, they already have a sense of, they know some people or they know where to go. Again, when you do those, visits, make sure that it's, they know where the different resources are. Again, if they go in, like, I have no clue, like, what anything is here, and then they go see those 100 tables in the quad, they're going to be overwhelmed. So maybe, again, have that plan of attack of these are some groups that I want to check out. I'm going to go there first. So identifying in advance, if they find a group that they like and they see when it meets, even do as much as encouraging them to not schedule classes during those times, to make sure that they can go. Just again, have kind of a plan before they get there, I think is important as well. All right, and I know there's more questions that I'll talk about in a second. So here are some things for the student to try to ask themselves in advance that could really help maybe figure out what's a must-have for them and if this school is going to be a good fit. So thinking about their situation now. So now it's kind of interesting, if you think about it, you as parents said, this is the school you're going to Hersey, try to look, when you get here, look for all the different, communities and ways you can get involved. And hopefully they found something where they feel they belong to at the school, whether again, it's a sport or a club or something like that. Now they have the chance to look for those communities and belonging first, and then pick the school. So it's like the opposite, right? So if they think about, though, how they're feeling now, when do I feel like my true self now? What makes those moments possible? If I'm worrying, what am I worrying about if I feel that I don't belong? And what is that related to? And really, like, what are my deal breakers for community? So if I'm a quiet space, somebody asked about extrovert, introvert, and I'll talk about that, or at least my thoughts in a second. But if depending on, do I need a quiet space? Do I need really need to make sure that my faith or heritage or background or ethnicity or race is really represented? I have to be a part of that. If I'm a high energy, person, is there going to be students who are I'm going to be able to find that with? There are some schools that are very, much more academic strict, and others that are, maybe the complete opposite and everything in between. So like, what are my deal breakers? There has to be these things here. Where can I see people who share my background in leadership or faculty? Like the community and the belonging, the core one, I believe, should be fellow students. Your whole community shouldn't be staff members or adults, but it's definitely important to have those connections, to feel like there are adults at the school that do care about you. Because that's part of, I think, some of the research findings they found, is that when students struggled with finances or different things, there was nobody from the school that really seemed like they cared to help them. So are there people who's at the school that they feel like they can turn to, who will understand their situation? Is there a office or a space or a person who handles situations if you feel like you're being discriminated against or disrespected or unsafe? How do they respond if there's those situations? A lot of that stuff was in the news lately for certain backgrounds, didn't feel safe at certain schools, and that's an important thing to consider, definitely. If there's campus events and traditions, those things that are supposed to foster community and belonging, do they seem to be inclusive, or are they only for athletes, or only for fraternity people, or only for, something? And then, if as much as you can, is there curriculum there, again, that's going to make you feel like you're in the classroom, your experience and your worldview is respected as well. And then, while you're doing those visits, if you have a chance to ask students, like I said, either formally or just if you feel like going up to random people and asking them, what makes you feel most connected to this community? What is it about it that, and have you had any trouble? Have you ever felt like an outsider? And how did you handle that? Was there somebody to help you? Is there an adult that you can count on? Some of these questions, again, I pulled from online. What is something about your identity that people here might not know, but you wish they did? And I think the point of that question is, why don't they know this? Are you afraid to share something? If so, that might be a red flag as well. How do you support your friends when they're struggling? And then, a popular question then is, would you recommend this college to others? Why or why not? And that could be pretty telling, as well. And sometimes students might say, oh, I would definitely recommend it if you're this type of student. I wouldn't recommend it if you're that type of student. And then it goes back to your student thinking, well, am I this one or that one, or who am I as a person? So those are, again, some questions, and we can definitely share this as well. So some of the questions that came in, and again, if you have questions, please put them in. So one of the questions was, is it better to do bigger schools for extroverted personalities and smaller schools for introverted? And it's a great question. It's a tough one to answer. These are my thoughts, and so you can take them as you wish. But I think obviously it really depends on the student and what they're hoping to get out of their college experience. So for an extroverted person, do they want that larger environment where they can always be meeting new people and doing new things, but maybe never but maybe it's harder to be, part of like a small, tight-knit community? Or do they want to be like a big fish in a small pond where they're kind of like that big man on campus, or for lack of a better term, or big woman, lady on campus, where they know everyone, and they kind of like that. So again, what are they hoping to get out of that? What does that extrovert quality or personality mean to them? And on the flip side, for introverts, maybe a larger campus would be a good way for them to get out more, and meet more people, and kind of work on that, especially if they're getting ready to go into a job field that maybe will require them to be a little bit more extroverted. Maybe that will help them. But maybe a small campus where everyone knows them and could be good or not. Maybe they will like that smaller sense. But again, if you're on a smaller campus and you have more discussion-based classes, that introvert's going to be expected to speak out and share in class, and that could be uncomfortable as well. So it can be harder, to hide in those senses. So, I think, kind of knowing, like, I don't know if one is better than the other for those different personality types, but kind of thinking about, well, what's the goal, and what, if I'm in these different situations, how might I feel? How might I react? Am I looking to grow in these areas, or am I, really looking to make sure that I feel comfortable first? So I don't know if that was a great answer. Those are just some of my thoughts on that one. Another question was, again, kind of going back to that settling down. I forgot to mention this earlier, settling in after freshman year. One of the things that I found that people talk about a lot is establishing a routine, helping your student in advance, not while they're there ideally, but in advance, think about establishing a routine. So when they're at home with you here, it's in high school, that you have a routine, like they wake up at a certain time, and this breakfast is at this time, and lunch is built into their schedule literally during the day here, and dinner is whenever you serve it. And they have this routine where they, kind of comfortable with, like, okay, I have to go here, there, or wherever. When they get to college and it's all this independence, whether they live on campus or not, it can be a little bit scary to, like, oh, what do I do with all my time? Where do I go? So, in advance, figure out, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time. These are my class schedules. Maybe I'm going to schedule in homework time. I'm going to schedule in exercise time. I'm going to schedule in those clubs that I found in advance that I want to go to. Going in advance, if they can, before school starts, to figure out where their classes are, to find out where those different offices are, as well, to make sure they, to reach out to roommates in advance, to try to introduce themselves. The longer you kind of avoid people you see every day, the more awkward it is when you finally need to talk to them. So from the start, introduce yourselves, join those clubs, go to all those activities that they give you. If there's things that you can help them do in advance, like, hey, make sure you do your laundry every week or however long, those kind of things, that maybe can keep them feeling more comfortable where they're at and not stressing, too much overall. Another question was, what are the benefits of attending Harper for a year or two before going to a 4-year university? So if we're talking in general terms, of course, if they don't know what they want to study, or if you want to save money or ease the transition, community college is a great way to kind of only have a few different changes instead of a lot of changes. Maybe now you're still living at home, you still have somewhat of a routine, but now your classes are different and you're just making a few new friends, but you might have some friends still at home. But in terms of community, that's where it's pretty interesting, right? It can be easier. It could be easier to connect with classmates if you go to Harper first, because everyone's from the same community, same feel. Everyone's from this area. There's probably a lot of people from Hersey that they would see, so it's not a huge, massive shock. Everyone goes home. There's nobody living on campus, so there's no like fear of missing out or those kind of things. And there are sports and clubs and etc., but everybody would have to, stay late or make a concerted effort to go. On the flip side, as we saw in the one beginning article about belonging, it can be tough to feel belonging at a school where everyone's just kind of going in and out and they're all at different points in their life. And community college classes can have a wide range of ages. Not everyone is an 18 or 19-year-old freshman or sophomore. And so that could be something to consider. When it comes to transferring then as well, that could be a little hard because there, a lot of the school, depending on what percentage of students are transfer students, if it's a small percentage, a lot of those students have already been there for 2-3 years or however long, and they might have already established their communities and their friend groups, and now you're trying to get in. So I would definitely look for schools that help with that transfer transition, that help transfer students build communities, even if it's a transfer club or group or lounge or something like that. That could be something that really helps foster community. And I know we're kind of running out of time. I think there was one more question that I had got in advance. Tips about for students to lower their overall anxiety about college and what's next for their life after Hersey. Again, great question. First, I want to say that it is very natural to be nervous, students and parents, about this big life change here. Again, so my biggest piece of advice is to do that research and do it from a personal level, okay? If you start looking at what other people are doing, what other people say, going on TikTok and all these other places and getting all these advice about what's best this, best that, all this stuff, you could go crazy, right? So really sit and start with the student. What are you looking for? What will make you feel comfortable? What are your must-haves? What are you a little bit more flexible on? From a parent lens, here's our expectations. I talk a lot of the presentations to be as upfront with your expectations as possible. If you need to under promise and over deliver, great. But if you over promise and under deliver, it kind of throws things off as well in terms of finances or expectations, how far you can go, so on and so forth. So, if you do that research, they should feel comfortable about their options and their choices if you have a balanced list and things like that, and that you're going to find belonging there. What happens a lot is students will apply to like 15 colleges or more, and then around this time, January, February, they'll come in and say, are there other schools I should have applied to? Like, what else should I look at? And I was like, really now? And I'll say, how do you feel about the ones that you already got into? Did you visit them? Did you research them? Is something wrong with those schools? And a lot of times they'll say, no, I like, this school and that school and whatever, but I'm just, but maybe I'm missing some. Is there some more? And because there's always that fear of the unknown, right? And so if you did the research, if you put in the work to find those good options that fit, like, you'll be okay. And, if it doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out for a lot of people, and I think it doesn't work out for a lot more people than we think, you're not stuck there forever. You can transfer out, you can change schools. I know it's not ideal, but I think sometimes students think like, I have to make this big decision right now as a 17 or 18-year-old, and it's going to be where I'm going to be for the next 4 years or more, and I have to stay there even if it's awful. And that's not the case. And again, you might have to take a step back or two before you can go forward, but it's not the end all be all if it doesn't work out the first time. And so, I would encourage, student to remind your student, like, this is a big decision. This is your first big decision. Sometimes decisions work out great. Sometimes they don't. But if you go into it, making sure you didn't just pick it for the major or the price or the reputation or the ranking, but you really looked at, is this a place overall that I will feel like I belong, I will grow, I will make connections, I'll be engaged, then it hopefully will be a good fit, and you'll feel excited to go to that next chapter and not, as apprehensive. So again, a lot of these are some of my thoughts and from, talking with people and doing this. So if anyone, that's all I have now. We're a few minutes over what I said. Hopefully this was helpful for you in what you were looking for. If not, let me know. If you have other questions that I didn't cover, I could stick around. Or if it's, as always, if you have a real personal question about your student or your family situation, email me and we can set up an appointment in person here on Google Meet, on the phone, whatever works for you and your family. So again, thank you so much for joining today. And I hope this gives you something to think about, and your students something to think about when you talk to them about this later, of why belonging and community should be a big factor in your search. So thanks.